Good morning, Guardians, sa buong mundo, lalong-lalo na po ang mga PGBI. Ito po muli si Founder Robbie, ang IOPAC Chairman ng Western Mindanao, sa patuloy ko pong pagpapaliwanag po sa ating CBL as amended 2015 dito sa Santa Rosa, Laguna hanggang sa 2018 sa Baguio City. Dito na po tayo sa Article 5 sa Territorial Division and Subdivision. Section 1, Territorial and Division. In order to facilitate easier administration and ensure efficient and effective implementation of the programs and objectives of the organization, the regular Territorial Division of the Philippine Guardians Brotherhood Incorporated, PGBI, which shall be equivalent to the area of responsibility, AOR, of each respective Executive Council, EC, and their respective Founders Group, FG, approximates the provincial highly urbanized cities and other cities, municipal and barangay subdivision of the Philippine Republic, adjustment in and creation and additional territorial subdivision shall be subject to implementing rules and guidelines provided by the National Executive Council. Section 2. The regular territorial subdivision shall be as follows. The provinces and highly urbanized cities, HUCs, the National Capital Region, NCR, including those outside NCR, which shall be approved by the National Executive Council. Regular municipal and city subdivision under provinces and barangay under cities and municipalities. Section 3. Other subdivision. Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. The regional subdivision which corresponding task groups or committees may be formed to assist the National Executive Council, NEC, and the National Secretariat, NS, in strengthening the provinces. Overseas shall be considered as a special province. It shall have its own territorial subdivision based on its special characteristic for easier governance and administration. Article 7. Government. The National Assembly. Section 1. Supreme Authority. The National Assembly is a national council. It shall constitute the supreme authority of the organization and direct its affairs. It shall retain all rights and privileges not specifically assigned to the National Executive Council, the National President, or any other office or officer of the organization. Section 2. Composition. The NA shall compose of the following: incumbent officers and members of the National Executive Council who shall have speaking and voting rights. B. Officers of the National Founders Group, NPG, and all incumbent president or in their absence duly designated official representative of the Provincial Executive Council in good standing prescribed in this Constitution and bylaws and other policies, rules, and regulation of the PGBI. Section 3. Powers and Prerogative. The National Assembly or the National Council shall be the highest policy-making body of the organization. It shall have the exclusive prerogative to vote in any or all of the following matters: to approve national policies, plans, and programs. B. To elect the National Executive Council, NEC. To amend and ratify the Constitution and bylaws of the PGBI. D. Review and approve, amend and reverse any decision, policy, proposal, or recommendation of the National Executive Council, the National Founders Group, the National President, and all other national office of the organization. Letter E. Decide on the venue of the regular national convention, NATCON, and decide or delegate such other matter as may be necessarily and proper effectively discharged to aims and purposes of the organization. Section 4. Quorum and votes required. The presence of at least 40% of the total voting strength of the National Assembly shall constitute an quorum, the majority vote of which shall constitute and valid act of the organization except on matters specified in this Constitution. Section 5. The National Assembly, the NA, shall be held every 3 years in a national convention, NATCON, on the month of April at the principal office of the organization or at any other places in the Philippines that the National Assembly may designate, or at least 1 year prior there by the National Executive Council. Section 6. The selection of the members of the National Executive Council shall be an special order during the National Convention or NATCON. Section 7. Special National Assembly. A special convention of the National Assembly may be called by the National Executive Council upon written notice to all members of the National Assembly at least 30 days prior to the specified date. Section 8. Supervision of business. The supervision of business arrangement and general program of the National Convention, including the extension of invitation to all concerned, shall be a responsibility of Secretary General under direction of the National President. Section 9. Qualification to vote. Only the official representative of the Provincial Council, incumbent officers of the National Executive Council, NEC, and newly elected officers of the National Founders Group in good standing as prescribed by this Constitution and other laws shall be entitled to vote in the National Assembly. Section 10. Speaking rights. All members of the National Assembly and other duly authorized representatives shall have speaking rights and are encouraged to participate actively in meetings, programs, and functions of the National Assembly. Section 13. Casting of votes. The principle of one vote, one delegate shall be applied in the election of officers and all decision-making process of the National Assembly. Section 14. National President vote. The National President shall have the right to vote in case where her vote is determinative of the outcome of the voting. Section 15. Chairmanship. The National President may delegate the chairmanship of a meeting to another officer designated by him/her, subject to the approval of the members present during that meeting. National Executive Council, NEC. Section 1. The National Executive Council, NEC, shall exercise the executive function of the national leadership of the PGBI. It shall also be highest policy-making and implementing body in between meetings of the National Assembly, NA. Section 2. Composition. The National Executive Council shall be composed of the following elective and appointed national officers of the organization: National President or Grand Supremo, National Vice President, Representative for Luzon, Visayas, Mindanao, Overseas, Chairman National Founders Group, Secretary General, and National Treasurer. Section 3. Duties. The National Executive Council shall have the following duties and responsibilities: act as the highest policy and decision-making organ in between national assemblies, NA, and it's accountable to the latter. As such, it shall promulgate policies, rules, regulation, and guidelines for the management and guidance of the PGBI. to control and exercise general supervision over the implementation and enforcement of the policies, plans, and programs and other affairs of the organization, to coordinate the activities of all offices and or officers in the performance of their duties, to receive and act on report and recommendation from all organs and offices, committees, commission, and other special bodies within the organization, to make recommendation to the National Assembly, to act of all matters referred to it by the National Assembly. Section 4, Voting Rights. All elected members of the National Executive Council shall have one vote each. Proxy votes are not permitted. Section 5, Regular Meeting. The National Executive Council NEC shall hold a regular meeting every year. Section 6, Special Meeting. Special meeting on the National Executive Council may be convened by the National President when necessary or when requested in writing by at least 5 members thereof. Notice of a special meeting must be given 15 days prior to such meeting except an emergency situation. Section 7, Quorum. The presence of the majority of all elected members of the National Executive Council and NEC shall constitute a quorum, the majority vote of which shall be constituted as valid act, the later unless otherwise provided by this Constitution. Section 8, Vacancies and Succession. In case of death, resignation, disability, or incapacity of the National President to discharge duty of his/her office, he/she shall be succeeded by the National Executive Vice President. The National Executive Vice President shall be succeeded any of the 3 representatives from Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao through the election among remaining members of the National Executive Council, provided, however, that he/she shall serve only remainder of the term of the office assumed. The National Secretariat. Section 1, Composition. The National Secretariat shall be composed of the Secretary General, who shall serve as its chairman, and Deputy Secretary for Luzon, Deputy Secretary for Visayas, Deputy Secretaries for Mindanao. The representative or desk officer for overseas the National Treasurer, the Chairman National Founders Group. Other member may be appointed by the National President as needed. It shall manage and administer the day-to-day implementation of the national policies, plans and programs, and activities to assist the National President in discharge of his/her duties. Section 2. Its policy and decision-making authority shall be limited to the provision granted in this Constitution and the policy guidelines and decision of the National Executive Council, NEC. The National President shall be accountable to the same. Power and duties, responsibilities. It shall be the primary implementing body of the National Executive Council, NEC, through the National President. It shall assist the National President in its day-to-day administration of the organization. It shall perform the duties and responsibilities of all national committees provided for its constitution until such time that the committees are formed and established. Letter D. It shall see the creation and supervision of the national committees provided for the Constitution upon approval of the National President. It shall It shall maintain the database of the organization and preserve journals and of the proceeding of the National Executive Council, NEC, and the National Assembly or the National Council. The National Secretariat, NS, shall receive and perform other tasks and function assigned to it by the national president. Anak po ang hopefully nakukuha po natin yung mga binabasa. Actually, meron po tayong mga talagang specific na kailangan iintindihin natin itong nakasaad dito sa ating bylaws. Ito po ang magiging gabay natin sa ating ginagawa pangkalahatan ng ating kapatiran guardians PGBI. So letter D, dito po sa Founders Group. Okay. Section 1, Founders Group. In recognition of the historical role of the founders in the creation established of the Philippine Guardians Brotherhood Incorporated, PGBI, and its chapter, and acknowledgement its continuing significant role in further strengthening of the organization, chapter founders and Founders Group shall have the following duties and responsibilities. In general, Founders Group shall serve as advisory groups of their respective executive council. In particular, it shall recommend policies, plans and program, and other advices to the concerned executive council through their chairperson or vice chairperson. It shall participate in the exercise and executive function through their chairperson and vice chairperson, who are automatic members of the said executive council of the same level. Number 3, it leads in recruitment and organizing work and undertake ceremonial roles in the respective areas of responsibility in accordance with the Constitution and bylaws, other policies of the organization, and other plans programs of the respective executive council. Number 4, it shall see the development of founders and Founders Group, and number 5, it shall also serve as the best example or model of being true guardian as envisioned and provided for the Constitution and bylaws. Section 2. Like all members, founders shall have all the rights, obligations, duties, and responsibilities of a member of the Philippine Guardians Brotherhood Incorporated, PGBI. They have the rights to be voted and appointed to any position in accordance with the appropriate provisions in the Constitution and other pertinent official documents of the PGBI. Section 3. Except of the national level where only the chairman of the National Founders Group is automatically a member of the National Executive Council, the chairman and vice chairman of each immediate Founders Group shall be a member of their respective NEC. Section 4. Founders who have been elected as officer of the Executive Council are automatically disqualified to run for the office in their respective Founders Group. Those elected as officers of Founders Group are automatically disqualified to run for the office of their respective Executive Council. Okay. Ipaliwanag ko lang po dito sa ako po ay isang founder organic. Dito po sa huling binasa ko, nakasaad po dito ang role po ng mga founder sa chapter man, sa munisipyo man, sa syudad hanggang provincial. Kung naintindihan nyo po yung huling binasa ko regarding sa ating mga founder, ay sana po maintindihan. Kasi meron po mga founder dito sa ating nasasakupan. Chairman po siya ng Founders Group ng isang syudad. Ang gusto niya mangyari, lahat ng desisyon ay idadaan sa kanya. Okay? Lahat po ng mga activities sa chapter dapat approve sa kanya. So, maliwanag po dito sa CBL na huling binasa ko. Kung naintindihan nila o ng mga founders, ano talaga ang role. Actually, malaki ang role po ng founders. No? Napakalaki po dahil hindi po pwedeng magmarka o magkaroon ng markings activities ang isang chapter pag walang founder. maliwanag po yan. Yan po ang talagang kahit saang branches ng guardians, hindi po nangyayari dyan na nagmamarka po yung presidente. Okay? Kailangan po, nandyan po yung founders. Pero, hindi naman porket founders siya, chairman siya ng isang syudad, ay lahat na ng activities ay kailangan approve niya. Malaki din po ang role po ng executive chairman or president dito po sa ating PGBI. So, maliwanag po. Sana po, medyo ako, hinihikayat ko po yung may mga posisyon po ng mga founders na may time po kayo, magbasa po kayo ng ating amended 2015 na CBL. Okay? Para at least hindi tayo nagiging baga alam natin na founder tayo, pero pala mali na yung ginagawa natin. Ito maliwanag po. Ito pinapaliwanag ko po sa inyo. Tayo po ay ang PGBI. Ang ating national president po walang iba kundi po ang ating kagalang-galang na sekretary ng DICT, si Gregorio G.S. Gringo Ballesteros Honasan II. At ang pangalawang pangulo po ng political affairs, walang iba po ang ating mabuting Senator Emmanuel RMD Destroyer Pacquiao. At ang isa pong pangalawang pangulo, si Ambassador Eduardo Supreme Godfather Red Kapunan. Meron po dyan mga PGBI na nagpapanggap na sila po daw ang lehitimo. Pero kung titingnan mo naman talaga, gumagawa lang po sila ng mga kabalastugan po na gamit po ang ating PGBI. Okay po, pagpatuloy ko po. Letter E, the National Officer and Election, Tenure and Qualification. Section 1, Elective National Officers. The following shall be the elective national officers of the organization. To be elected, the National Assembly or National President, Grand Supremo, National Executive Vice President, Representative for Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, Representative Overseas. To be elected by the National Founders Group, Chairman National Founders Group, Vice Chairman National Founders Group, and Secretary National Founders Group. So, hanggang dito na lang po ang aking papaliwanag po sa CBL hanggang page 22. Ito po muli, si Founder Robbie, ang IOPAC Western Mindanao. Bago ko po tapusin itong aking video, so may konting paliwanag lang po ako dito sa lumalabas na may iba pang PGBI nagpapanggap na legitimate PGBI. Maliwanag po sa akin. Ako po ay namarkahan noong 1998. Galing po ako ng GBI. Naging godfather po ako sa GBI. Noong 2000 May, naging founder po ako ng PGBI dahil transfer po ako from GBI to PGBI. From that point, di na po ako naglipat-lipat pa. No? Naging lehitimo tayong founder po ng PGBI. Ang panawagan ko lang po dito sa ating mga bro na nagpapanggap po ng PGBI. Kung totoo man kayo na sinasabi nyo na tama po yung ginagawa ninyo, lumantad kayo. No? Tumawag kayo o magpakita kayo dito sa island ng Mindanao. O yung tinatawag nyong Grand Supremo ninyo. No? Papuntahin nyo. Makipag-dialogue po kayo sa amin. Kasi ang aming pagkaalam, isa lang po ang Grand Supremo. Si Grand Supremo Gregorio Gringo Ballesteros Honasan II. Siya po ang inelect doon sa Baguio City noong 2018. Ayun, nagkapalabas kayo kung ano-ano yung mga sinasabi nyo na ganito, na-expel si ganito. Ako, marami akong alam. No? Nagkabuwag-buwag na dito sa Zamboanga City, dito sa Region 9. Dahil doon sa mga leader na hindi malaman kung ano talaga yung mga dapat gawin para sa kapatiran. No? Panawagan ko po lahat ng PGBI Mindanao. Huwag po tayong magpaloko dito sa mga manloloko na guardians. No? Wala po tayong sweldo dito. Wala po tayong hidden agenda dito sa organization ng PGBI. Nandito tayo, binigyan tayo ng katungkulan para pamunuan itong PGBI. So gawin lang natin ano yung nararapat para lumaki tayo, para lumakas ang PGBI sa buong mundo. Okay? So sa muli, nananawagan po ako. Lahat po ng PGBI na under kabro ko si Gringo ay huwag kayong magpapaloko dito sa hindi kabro ni Gringo Honasan. No? Lahat po, alam ko meron dyan naloloko lang o nami-mislead lang po o na-misinformation po kayo. Wala pong ibang Grand Supremo ng PGBI kundi si Gringo Honasan. Yan po ang lihitimo. Dahil nagkakaroon ng continue every 3 years, nagkakaroon po tayo ng National Convention. So nag-attend na po ako ng 2 convention, which is Santa Rosa, Laguna 2015, 2018 sa Baguio City. Doon ko po at pumunta at nagpa-elect po uli si Grand Supremo Gringo Honasan. So doon sa mga leaders na nagdadala at nanggugulo lamang dito sa ating PGBI ay tumigil na kayo. No? Magpasaklaw na po kayo, no? Doon sa tamang daan, hindi yung kayo meron kayo personal interest eh. Kayo itong mga PGBI sa kabila, itong ibang grupo ng PGBI, kayo ang may mga ginawang mga kabalastugan. Kayo ang gumawa ng hindi maganda. So tigilan nyo na itong PGBI na nagpapanggap, no? Hindi ko banggitin kung sino man kayo, pero ako nananawagan ako. Maging makatotoo po tayo bilang isang guardians. Okay? So, sa lahat po ng under po ng Western Mindanao ng probinsya, so magpakatatag po kayo. Meron talaga mga challenge sa ganyan. May mga siraan talaga dito sa guardians. Para tayong mga artista, siraan portion. Pero sa totoo lang, wala naman tayo dapat pag-aawayan dito dahil iisa lang po ang ating layunin dito. No? Magsilbi po sa bayan. No? Serbisyo publiko. Muli, ito po si Founder Robbie. Subaybayan nyo po ang ating YouTube channel, Founder Robbie, PGBI Guardian Mindanao. Mabuhay po ang Guardians, mabuhay po ang PGBI, mabuhay po ang ating Grand Supremo, Gregorio G.S. Gringo Ballesteros Honasan. Mabuhay, long live PGBI.